Hey everyone, today I'm going to provide an evidence-based review whether recreational marijuana use is good for you or bad for you. I'm inspired to create this video because, as we all know, marijuana is legal now in Canada. But it's a question I get over and over again: is marijuana good for you? Is it bad for you? It's something that kind of irritates me because, not the question itself, but this notion that marijuana is this harmless, pleasurable drug that should have been legal so long ago because it's natural, it's not bad, it's tobacco and alcohol that's so horrible. And that's absolutely not true. There's very serious adverse outcomes, and despite what many other videos or other crap that's out there, I'm going to provide an evidence-based review by our research article. It's done by the world experts who are studying this material. That's published in New England Journal of Medicine, because it's easy to cherry pick very random studies done in small sets looking at very specific things with significant flaws to prove your point. But instead you want to look at studies and meta-analysis. Those are the highest quality studies that are going to collectively synthesize data by the world experts who know this field, have read every single paper, and are trained to analyze their research. And in this great article, he kind of details the adverse outcomes of recreational marijuana use and kind of the strength of confidence we can have in whether these associations are very believable or seem to be true or not. And the most important point to understand about marijuana use is the vulnerability during the youth, especially as adolescents, because the developing brain is much more sensitive to any substance than one that's fully developed, and the brain continues to develop up until the age of 25. And some neuroscientists are even making the argument that whether you are charged criminally as a minor should extend to age 25, because your brain and especially your prefrontal cortex, which is kind of your impulse control, isn't fully developed until then. But let's understand marijuana. One of the most common misconceptions is that marijuana is not addictive, and that's absolutely not true. 1 in 6 teenagers who begin using marijuana during their adolescent period become addicted to marijuana, as determined by the DSM-5 criteria of substance use disorder. Further, 50% of daily marijuana users are addicted to marijuana. That's just incredibly high. This notion that it's a benign drug that's not addictive is just not correct. Secondly, it seems very intuitive, we know it just from experience, but marijuana adversely affects brain development. We know acutely as you take marijuana, when you use marijuana or weed, it negatively impacts brain function in the moment, but it also does over the long term. And it's been shown that adolescents and youth that use marijuana have decreased neural connectivity, basically fewer neural fibers, and decreased executive function, which is basically your impulse control or your CEO of your brain, which allows you to excel in whatever you're going to do. And also there's a very substantial literature looking at marijuana use and a negative impact on mental health. There is definitely good research about depression, anxiety, but the strongest research is specifically around psychosis or developing schizophrenia. And this is why I argue that marijuana is not less harmful than cigarettes. I say it's way more harmful, because you get lung cancer when you're 7, you smoked your whole life, you have heart disease, okay, you're 7 years old, you lived a good life, and then you die. We're all going to die when we get old. Marijuana, you see young kids excelling, very sheltered, go to university, try some marijuana, come back, they're admitted to the psych ward, and they have schizophrenia the rest of their life, and their life is ruined. That is way worse than getting lung cancer when you're 70. And what they've really found is people with the right vulnerabilities or specific genetic polymorphism, which is tiny changes in DNA, our psychiatry lecturers have showed us, that research just showed that if you have certain polymorphism, your chance of schizophrenia when you're exposed to marijuana as your teenagers increases by 720%, which is just remarkable. So yes, a lot of people, especially youth, take it. They don't have any obvious signs of psychosis, but psychosis, do you want to risk having psychosis and getting your whole life totally transformed just because you tried some marijuana? That's up to you. And the depression anxiety research is quite compelling as well. Also, this is no surprise. We know alcohol and driving doesn't mix. It's the same as marijuana. It drastically increases the risk of motor vehicle accidents. Something that I thought was quite fascinating is just overall professional, scholastic, and just lifetime achievement. There's a dramatic decrease in income, satisfaction with life, and increases in criminal behavior with increasing marijuana use. And lastly, there's been some contention. It's not very clear the relationship between marijuana use and cancer, but there's a very strong connection that smoking marijuana causes airway inflammation, which drastically increases the risk of chronic bronchitis, which is something you don't want, and you can get very serious complications as a result of that. So overall, marijuana isn't good for you. It's not this harmless natural medication that's totally fine. Yes, there is some very fascinating research going into how certain aspects or specific like the cannabinoids, which are actually sold as prescription medications now, can be very useful in certain situations. But the research really is lacking. Like I know one of our top neurologists said that for multiple sclerosis patients, marijuana anecdotally has very good results as it seems to treat the spasticity well, but it's very horrible for Parkinson's disease. So this notion that marijuana is this magical untapped thing that drug companies don't want to touch is just nonsense, because they are prescription drugs already of these specific cannabinoids that are targeted, because that's one of the biggest problems, especially with recreational marijuana use. Hopefully it'll get better as it's legalized and overseen, and there's control by the government of Canada over the quality we're getting. But I'm not even scared of just marijuana, even though it's scary itself, all the stuff changing because it crosses the blood-brain barrier, can increase risk of psychosis, etc. But the fact that it's going to be laced with fentanyl or all this other crap, so hopefully that clears up with the government in Canada. But again, I'm not very trusting until it's very regulated. At least pharmaceutical companies, they do some unsavory things, but at least I know what I'm getting when I'm taking a certain pill, etc. So I really hope you enjoyed this video. It showed you kind of the evidence-based review of some of the significant harms, and that marijuana isn't this harmless pastime that should have been illegal 30, 40 years ago. And what's really compelling, I thought, from this article, he talked about that we think that it's this heroin and crack cocaine and crack and cocaine and methamphetamines that are really driving all the deleterious effects from drugs. And yes, they do have devastating impacts on many people, but the drugs that have the most impact on a societal level are so far alcohol and tobacco, not because they're the most dangerous, but because they're most widely available. And now marijuana is becoming more available. And this is really be important to understand, that to try to yourself, we can take initiative and be proactive and realize, hey, if I'm trying to use it for a medical condition, sure, the research really isn't compelling. I've talked to a lot of physicians. A lot of physicians are totally not for marijuana prescribing it right now because the evidence isn't there. It'd be like saying, I'm not going to prescribe a drug because this hasn't been shown to work. Why would I want to prescribe a drug that we don't know if it works? And it's starting to become, and I hope there's more research, and I hope that we figure out that if there is good therapeutic initiatives in house patients, that's excellent. But I'm not going to want to prescribe something if there's not good research for it right now. And that's all drug companies have a really high bar standard, and it's kind of frustrating how these dispensaries work because they're all illegal. I think it's changed now, but before they've been all illegal. And if a drug company was magically selling you magic pills to take or pill bottles, that would be blasphemy. But it's okay for these dispensaries to sell you all these fancy ways to smoke your cannabis or store it, all that nonsense. So I really hope you enjoyed this video. It kind of gave you to understand that cannabis isn't, marijuana isn't this harmless pastime that's just fun and pleasurable and everybody does it and there's no harm in it. It's because it's natural. That's just nonsense. It has increasingly, there's anecdotal evidence showing and some preliminary research showing it has cool therapeutic uses in certain diseases, but we need more research to really clarify in what aspect of it, because there's a reason why we take aspirin or metformin or hydroxychloroquine. They're all from herbs, but that way we target the therapeutic aspect out of that natural product, and we make it much more effective and decrease the side effects because we've isolated the active ingredient. So I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a big thumbs up, and make sure to subscribe to continue getting more awesome videos about evidence review, my journey through medical school, and just learning how to be the best you can be. Thank you.